Listen, listen, listen. Be prepared. Only promise what you can deliver. And if you can do that, if you do that, I have no doubt you will find success in whatever you decide to do.
Welcome to Behind the Screens, conversations with background screening pros. I'm Les Rosen, your host, and I'm excited to have you here. On this podcast, we chat with the people who know the background screening world inside and out. Executives, industry experts, legal pros, and more. We dive into their personal stories and insights to give you a real look at what's happening behind the scenes. Whether you work in the screening industry or are just curious, Behind the Screens bring you the real, unfiltered conversations from the people who make it all happen. Stick around for stories you won't hear anywhere else. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a very special episode of Behind the Screens, a podcast that really shines a bright light on those people who really make the industry happen. And talk about a happening person who makes the industry happen. We have with us a very special guest who was not only a member of the first board of directors of then NAPBS, now PBSA. She was, if I recall, and as I get older, I don't recall exactly, but I believe the second co-chair of the organization, a person who has been mightily involved in background screening and the association, a recipient of the Mike Sankey Lifetime Achievement Award, which is quite an achievement. And of course, for those of you who are at home trying to guess who this is, well, of course, it's Mary Poquette. Mary, welcome to the program. I'm so happy to have you here.
Thank you, Les. Thank you for inviting me to join the podcast.
It wouldn't be a background screening podcast without you. You are an essential guest on this particular program. So thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
So before we get into the substance, where are you talking to us from today? Where is Mary Poquette? Where in the world are you?
Sometimes I wonder the same thing, Les. I am currently in my home in Minneapolis, and I'm happy to say that there are no signs of winter yet in Minneapolis, so it would be safe for you to travel back here. And I hope I don't see any signs of winter for a very long time.
All right, so winter has yet to hit, right?
It is 85 degrees here today.
Oh my God! Of course, when winter does hit, Minneapolis has this wonderful system where you can walk for miles and miles between buildings with all these walkways. So it's really quite impressive. So what are you doing these days?
Okay, what am I doing? Well, this may be a first for the Behind the Screens podcast, but my current position is non-existent. I fully retired from the background screening industry a couple of years ago. And unlike our pal, Jason Morris, who said he couldn't stay retired because of his ADD, my ADD is just fine doing retirement kind of stuff. Although I will say I've kind of turned into a professional volunteer. I have done everything from packing 40-pound bags of onions, and that was not my favorite. My favorite actually was volunteering at the Bloomington Police Department. And I volunteered there a couple days a week. I did that for almost 2 years. I answered non-emergency phone lines during the day. And when you think you've heard all the things that people could possibly call for, there's always something new. It was a lot of fun. It was everything from, do I have to report? I drove over a traffic cone to, my wife says she's having a heart attack. Would you have somebody stop by when they have a minute? That call got transferred to the 911 operator. It was just everything. And the only part of it that was sad was that many of the calls dealt with mental health issues. And that's just so sad. There was one lady who called and said, she had been told she couldn't leave her house all winter. And I said, well, who told you that? And she said, I don't know. So, a lot of things like that. Now, in the city of Bloomington, the police department adding more people, more staff trained specifically to deal with people like that. But that is really such a huge need, such a huge need. So that's what I have been doing.
That's fantastic. I will have to say, there are two people in this program who have been retired. I'm the other one. So,
Okay.
I think it's great.
But see, I'm really retired. Now, I was also involved in the Citizens Police Academy, and I'm a pretty good student. So, of course, I passed. I passed all of the sessions. And then I was offered, they wanted to know if I wanted to transport prisoners from the Bloomington City Jail to the Hennepin County Jail downtown. And no, I didn't think that was a good role for me. I didn't think this lady should be doing something like that.
I just had this picture that you're so nice that you would transport a prisoner who did God knows what. And you say, why don't we stop for lunch and and have a soft drink and
So now I'm looking for my next volunteer opportunity. I mean, the food shelf stuff, that's always there, and that's good to do. But I'm starting to talk with some people from one of the major hospitals here about how I might assist them. So,
oh, that's fantastic. So, and I should add, just for historical context, you mentioned Jason, who was your co-chair in year two of PBSA and
Yes.
PBS. So that's how he comes into it.
yes, I watched his podcast just a couple of days ago, and he mentioned his ADD problem and why he had to go back to work post first retirement. So,
And are you still hiking around every lake that you can find?
not everyone, I do like to get out and walk, but really like walking on the golf course. In the summer weather, that is my favorite thing. So that's where I try to be whenever I can.
Well, as a public service warning, I do need to warn people, if they come out to Minneapolis to visit you, you will run their butt rapid around a lake or a golf course, and like you did to me. And
What? Les, that's not true. We only walked, I think it was one or two lakes. As you said, there's 10,000.
that's right. There's 10,000 lakes left, and left 10,000 lakes. So, all right. So you have this wonderful retirement, doing really interesting and things that are sometimes bittersweet, as you described, and lots of opportunities. But before retirement, describe your path to where you are now, starting wherever you'd like, going as far back as you like.
Okay, well, Les, I am going to skip my paper route. Even though I learned a lot about managing accounts receivable with my paper route, I'll fast forward past that. My first real job out of college was as a school teacher. And I taught school in a very large high school in southern Michigan. And I did that for 6 years. And it was good. I mean, the kids were great. The parents, not quite so much. But overall, it was a good experience. And fortunately, way back then, we didn't have to deal with the horrific things that teachers do today, things that happen in schools today. However, we did have some issues. They were just much more benign. That's the word I'll use. And so, one of them was kids smoking cigarettes in the bathrooms. And when I would go in there and tell them to put their cigarettes out, nobody would believe I was a teacher because I was only 17 when I started to teach. So,
Oh my God.
yes, just 17. So anyway, and the other thing that was really most memorable, this was way back in the time of something called streaking. And streaking was one or more students taking off all their clothing and running up and down the hallways in the high school until somebody caught them and stopped them. That was streaking. So when I say there was a lot of things about teaching that were fun, I couldn't admit it at the time, but yeah, that was pretty fun. I could not imagine, though, doing that for 20 or 30 more years. So after 6 years, I resigned and I went to work in the business world. And when technology first got into offices, it got in with word processing machines. And some of your listeners might know what those were, but a word processor was this huge box. I mean, it was a dedicated machine. All it did was word processing, kind of the equivalent, well, not as good as, but like MS Word, for example. And so I went to work for this company that sold and supported these, and this was still in southern Michigan. And I taught people how to use them, and I managed a few employees, and so on and so on. And that was
Those
fun.
were, and I mean, those were the big machines that had like 12-inch floppy disks or something.
Yes, they did. They had, and the floppy disk really did flop, and they would go like that, and people would use their data and so on. But, that was my start into the business world. And it was an easy transition because part of my role was still to teach people what to do with this word processor. And, we even had these word processors that were enclosed in like a lead case. And that was for the government to use in secret stuff. There were no emissions coming out of this lead line case. And if the box was so heavy to start with, let alone when you got all the lead wrapped around it. But it was an interesting experience. It was a good way to start. But in Michigan, as the auto industry goes, so goes the economy of that area. And after 2 years, the auto industry was once again in a slump. And so the people I was working for decided to lay me off. Okay, they laid me off. But it just happened to be my 30th birthday.
Wow.
They knew it was my birthday because after they laid me off and I got done laying off other people, they brought in my birthday cake.
All right.
That was a little odd. But anyway, it
Were
all
those machines called I mean, there was machines back then called Videx, if I recall.
one came from a company called CPT. There was one called NBI, which stood for nothing but initials. That's what the manufacturer said. Those machines were very popular, but they were very successful. So what I did when I got laid off is I contacted the manufacturer of those word processors, and the manufacturer was in Minneapolis. And I said, I know your products, blah, 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 blah. And within a month, I had been to Minneapolis to interview. I had gotten a job. They moved me, and I got out of southern Michigan, and that's when I first got to Minneapolis. And
There
I
you
was
go.
very happy to do that.
Wow.
Yeah. So,
But it doesn't stop there.
oh, no, it doesn't stop there because eventually I worked for that company for almost 10 years, but then I relocated from the United States to Johannesburg, South Africa. And yeah, surprise, surprise.
I
And
did not know that.
Well, yeah, that was a pretty well kept secret. Anyway, I got to Johannesburg. This was right when Nelson Mandela had been released from jail. There was a lot of stuff going on in Johannesburg and South Africa. But I was there, and I did work somewhat there. I was there for about 3 years. And I might tell you why I was there a little bit later. But anyway, let's see, it was January of 1993, and I came back to the United States. And of course, I needed a job. Former colleagues said, hey, I've got a couple projects that you might do for us. And she said, if you're interested, I said, sure, I'm interested. And one of those projects was writing an operations manual. And guess what kind of company it was, Les?
I'm waiting with bated breath.
It was a background screening company.
Oh my God, you're
Yes,
kidding.
it was a very small company, but they didn't have anything written down. I, it was it was odd, people would come in and they would get trained anyway, and the owner of the company was a little bit concerned about that, the loss of knowledge when people left and so on. So I said I would be happy to write an operations manual for them. And so I interviewed employees, I watched what they did, I read their stuff, proposals, whatever, anything I could get my hands on. And 6 weeks later, I had this operations manual. And, I thought, this is really fun. This is interesting. I want to do this. However, they only had 9 employees and they had no place for me. They had no place for me. So I left. I went back to that managing people and selling and blah, blah, client service, that kind of stuff. However, and I'm getting close to the end of my journey, the owner of that company, 2 years later, called me and said, our vice president is leaving. Are you interested in coming in and talking to me about a job? I'll be right there. Yes, indeed. So this was in August of 95. I started to work for this background screening company. So, and it was great. I was the 10th employee. And that meant, when you got a small company, and so I was like kind of in charge of everything. So whether it was sales, operations, accounting, whatever, it was up to me to see that it got done and it got done on time and so on. And surprise, surprise, I really turned out to be quite a good salesperson. Now we had some great salespeople. They would get the appointments with the prospective client. We would go in together and I would do the selling. And, that's when we talked so much about the benefits of background screening and why it was a benefit for them. And it was important to do it right and we could do it right and so on. So that was so much fun. The decade from 1995 to 2005, I think those 10 years were the best career years I had. I enjoyed it so much. And during that time, we grew from, like many screening companies did, we grew a lot. We grew from 10 employees to over 300.
Wow. And
Yeah.
I'm sure I know the name, but if you want to give
Okay.
it away?
Yes, I will give it away. The company was Verifications Incorporated. And so, we, over that 10-year span, from 10 employees to 300, what we did is we started hiring managers for different functional areas, managers that really knew that specific function. So we hired a real sales manager instead of me. We hired an operations manager that knew ISO, that had brought companies through the ISO certification process. So we kept and when I say we, I'm referring to the owner of the business. So we kept handing off to other managers these departments that I used to manage all by myself. However, I kept my favorite department. And that favorite department was compliance. I became the chief compliance officer and later chief compliance and security officer. And it was, I always regret not having gone back to law school. Anyway, so it was my opportunity to sort of meddle in legal stuff, which was kind of dangerous. But it was, as I said, it was my favorite time of my career. I was so proud of what we had done, my role in it. It was just really great. And by the way, that decade was also the decade that PBSA was formed.
Right.
Right, it was. And that was a whole new adventure.
Wow. And during that time, what a great story, and to be part of a firm that goes from 10 to 300, and those were the days, of course, before a lot of technology, and there was a real labor and lot more labor intensive, but still, it's really impressive. Who were some of the mentors or influencers in your career, and or some of the team members you might want to mention?
Well, I don't have permission to mention them by name, but I might be able to get away with it anyway. So, but I was very fortunate throughout my career to always have mentors, influencers, even as far back as teaching. But I want to start with the most recent group of influencers, and those were and remain today all of the rock stars in PBSA. Those, I mean, the people in PBSA, the wealth of knowledge that those people have is truly amazing. And the fact that they are willing to share it both collectively and individually. I mean, in all the time I was in screening and part of PBSA, never once, when I needed help and I asked a question, did anybody ever tell me, no, I don't have time? And I knew those people didn't have time, but they always made and still make time to help others. And so, I mean, how could I not be influenced by this incredible group of people who had all this knowledge, who were so willing to share it, and were such just genuinely such great people? So that's the most recent group of influencers. Now, I did have others during my career. There was one gentleman in particular at Verifications who was truly amazing. I mean, he was very much a data-driven guy, and he could extract data. He could take that data and massage it. He could figure out, how long we were spending on doing certain things where we were getting no return on what we were doing. I mean, he allowed us to get so much smarter in how we did what we did, when possible, applying technology to it, but not always. It was just, how are we doing this, and is this the best possible way for us to do it? Also, when I was with Verifications, I had the opportunity to work with a performance coach. They made that investment with me. Phew, that was needed. So anyway, and finally, Les, I would be remiss if I didn't mention what I call reverse influencers. And those are the people that don't really do much, either because they don't know what to do or they're too lazy to do it. But anyway, their influence on me, they are a continuous reminder of what I never wanted to be. So those
Wow.
reverse influencers, played an important role.
Oh, that's fantastic. What a great story. And you had a team of other people doing with compliance with you after a while, I assume.
Oh, yes, and real attorneys besides.
Right. And
Melissa, Melissa Sorensen, who is now, of course, executive director for PBSA. I am very proud to have brought her into the industry, along with Kelly Ubell and a lot of other people whose names you might not recognize, but people who went on to just were top-notch people. They were just outstanding. I always thought it was easier to hire really good people than to have to kind of nitpick, manage kind of so-so people. I didn't want to do that. I wanted to find and hire really good people, give them opportunities, let them take it away. And if I was real lucky, I got a little bit of the credit too.
Oh, that's fantastic. So, I mean, what a great story. And yeah, I mean, you were just absolutely in the thick of everything, and the people that you helped bring up and in the industry who are just such leaders today as well. What a great legacy. So with all of this great experience you have, starting from, I love your story about high school when the worst thing that would happen were smoking and streaking.
Uh-huh.
It sounds like so Leave It to Beaver now.
Yeah. People didn't smoke while they were streaking. It didn't seem to work together.
Right, that's true. That's a really good point. All right. We all learned lessons along the way, but what's an early lesson or a lesson that you learned that is kind of top of mind, that
Okay.
bubbles at the top that you'd like to share?
Okay, this is always the lesson that bubbles to the top. And that lesson is don't wear a necktie to work if you are going to work with a high speed, high volume shredder. And
Oh, right. Okay. I didn't hear the word shredder. I got it. Gotcha. Okay.
that's a really important word in this. And okay, so I mean, you can probably figure out where this little story is going, but it was right before Christmas. I was wearing a full length Christmas tie. I was very festive in the office. So anyway, we were having a prospective client come in the next day to visit. And I knew in this back room where the big shredder was, we had some stacks of paper that had lots of PII on them. And we had to get rid of those. And everybody was busy working. And so near the end of the day, I thought, well, I'm just going to go do it myself. It's got to be done. So I was back there. I was going gangbusters. I would grab a bunch of paper into the shredder. I'd go back and I'd get some more. And I got this whole kind of rocking back and forth thing going. And that one time the shredder caught my tie.
No.
Yes, it caught my tie. And I tried to reverse the shredder. Nope. I couldn't get the tie out. I couldn't get the shredder to reverse. I was stuck. And finally, an employee came into that room and got a pair of scissors and cut me out. And I had this much of the tie left. So that was a lesson I learned pretty early in my background screening career. Watch out for the ties.
So an undisclosed employee saved your life, and somewhere maybe in the background, did you have the remainder of the tie, or did you? And that was lost to history.
I think it was lost to history. But anyway, it is. It was funny, but it was also kind of fun. It was just, one of those strange things that happened. But one of the most important things is to listen. If you're talking to a prospective client or a client or an employee, it's really important that you listen to what they have to say. That's how you get to know people. You get to know what's important to them, what they want, what they're trying to do. And until you know that, you really can't help them. So, listening. Second thing, be prepared. And if you are going to present yourself as an expert, you better be one. And I've got an embarrassing story to tell about that, because this must have been late 96, early 97. I had checked with our attorneys, and they assured me that the FCRA had no impact at all on background screening for employment. Now, in their defense, I will say they were corporate type attorneys. They were not background screening type attorneys. So, okay, I took them at their word. That was my problem. I took them at their word. And I went to see this prospective client all by myself, and everything was going fine. And a gentleman says, well, what about the FCRA? And I said, my attorneys have shared with me that the FCRA has no impact on background screening for employment. Well, of course, we didn't get that business. I was supposed to be an expert. And so when I say be prepared, if you are the expert, check your sources, check more than one source. And now we do have a lot of resources available within the background screening world. But back then, it was, you had to dig around to find stuff. That was even before you wrote your first book, Les. Otherwise, I would have just picked up your book and looked. But anyway, so it was very embarrassing to not know what the FCRA really was. Never did that again. Never. Was always prepared. And I guess the third and last thing, the last lesson, only promise when you know you can deliver what you've promised. That's it.
It's such great lessons. I love the first lesson about listening, and I know if we talked more about it, we talked about the fact that one of the 7 habits of highly effective people is listen, before you want to be heard, and really listen to what they're really not what they're saying, but what they're really saying, the meaning behind their saying. And so that's something I'm sure we've all been involved in. And I love your story about don't take anyone's word for anything, especially in attorneys, right?
Well, given all of the factors, their specialties, the importance of the FCRA, the size of this prospective client, who shall remain nameless. I mean, I was a really bad girl with that one. That's for sure.
But you learned your lesson. That was an eye opener, and afterwards you went, okay.
Okay. I got my very own, I after that I never went very far without my very own copy of the FCRA.
All right. Oh, those are great things to share, and I hope everyone listening takes them to heart. So Mary, one of the, really impressive things, and, I thought I knew you pretty well, but you've said some things, and we'll go into them later, that I did not know. You obviously have so many skills, which you could have applied to just any number of industries and other things, but you stayed in background screening. What's up with that?
What's up with that? For the most part, I really, really enjoyed it. And I also believed in what we were doing. It's, I would not be, I could never sell something or convince somebody to buy something if I didn't believe that it was really a quality product, a quality pair of shoes, a quality whatever it was. Mm-hmm. I am probably the worst liar ever. People would see right through me. And, I enjoyed what I did. And I stayed. We all know that there has been a whole lot of consolidation in the industry and so on. And I had a pretty good idea that Verifications was going to be acquired. And so I stayed through that final bit, that acquisition period. And then when that acquisition went through, First Advantage acquired the company. I decided I was going to do some independent consulting for a while. And then after that, I was going to retire.
Good for you. Yeah. So looking back at everything you've accomplished, there's so many, so many things we could talk about, but we don't have all day. But what comes to mind as what we call our proud moments question, looking back, is there a particular accomplishment or a particular achievement that, among all of them, that really stands out as something that you might want to share with us today?
Yes. Receiving the Mike Sankey Lifetime Achievement Award from PBSA was a very, very proud moment in my life. That was just wonderful. Second accomplishment.
And by the way, it's so well deserved, and congratulations again. That was wonderful.
Thank you. The success of Verifications Incorporated and my role in that. I was proud of my body of work, if you will, that helped that company be successful for so long. I was very proud of that. Those are really the two things.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, before we pivot to things outside of screening, and I'm not going to let you get away with just mentioning South Africa in passing, so we will go back to that. But obviously, you played a big role in PBSA, and PBSA, I think, has played, as you've indicated, a big role in your career. How has it PBSA influenced your career? How's it been for you? Your relation, what's it done?
PBSA made me a better employee, a better person, a more knowledgeable person, a more confident person. I, I was, as you know, I was on the original board of directors. I was co-chair with Jason Morris the second year, did lots of committee work, worked on specific projects like the very first accreditation standard. Oh, yes, I thought that was going to be so easy. We're just going to write some standards. How tough can that be? Oh, my goodness. Anyway, and then also being part of the Background Screening Credentialing Council, doing all of those things, and that's just kind of a sampling, it pushed me to step forward, to volunteer, to do more, to try things that I didn't feel necessarily qualified to do, but okay, we'll try, and hopefully with some help and advice and so on, we'll get it done. PBSA provided the framework for all of that to happen because, in your work life, it's very easy to get so busy with the work and keeping up with, goals and objectives and so on, that you don't really push yourself in the same way. And as I said, I think my involvement in PBSA really made me into a better, smarter person, employee, and so on. I mean, how could I not learn a whole bunch of stuff from people like you, Les, Mr. Capwell, ladies like Melissa, Kelly, Angela Preston? I mean, it's just like, so many people to be really quite in awe of. So that's what PBSA did for me. It was,
I would be remiss if I didn't mention everything you did for PBSA. It was such a pleasure having you on that first board. And such a marvelous asset in all the things you did and everything. So anyway, it's a bit of ancient history now, given that
PBSA.
It was just so great working with you that very first year, and as things were just starting to gel. So we've talked about your career path and career lessons and your fear of shredders and and so many marvelous things. But there is life beyond background screening. I'm told. I've heard.
There is.
And you shared with us some of the things you're doing now, and some of the bittersweet moments at the police department, and so many interesting things. But generally speaking, is there any hobbies or interests outside of work and outside of volunteering you'd like to share with us?
I've already mentioned golf. I really love to golf, which is actually kind of strange because I'm not really very good at it. But, the weather is reasonably nice. Walking on a golf course, either I'm with some friends or I'm golfing with some new people that I'm getting to know. It is just, I just so enjoy doing that. One of my favorite things also is to escape to warm weather. And, people have said to me, well, Mary, why don't you just move? And, like many people, I stay here because of family.
Right.
We all do stuff like that. But I have started sneaking out for a few weeks or a month at some point during the winter just to take a break. But, the idea of snow and ice, I know, the only place that ice belongs is in a cocktail. How about that?
And do you care to name your favorite cocktail in case anybody at a PBS meeting wants to regale you with your favorite cocktail?
This is not. I'd like a light beer, please. Actually, that's really one of my favorite things. But in addition to that, I love to travel. I love live entertainment, whether that's music, sports, a Broadway show, I love watching stuff that's being presented live. But the most important thing, pretty much regardless of the activity, is friends. I can't
Nice.
imagine not having friends in my life to do things with. And if it happens that we end up at the beach and we've got food and fun, maybe even a bottle or two of champagne, that's all great. But the really important thing is sharing time with friends, because that can never be replaced.
It's all about people. So do you have a favorite escape spot if you have your choice and you're able to get to?
Well, there's a small town in Florida called Indian Rocks Beach, which is right on the Gulf. And that is I like that because it's not like, it hasn't become like totally dominated by tourists and so on. It still has quite a bit of a kind of small, beachy community feel. So that's one of the places that I like to go. You know, there are a lot of places, but as I said, someplace that's warm, and if I have,
Without snow.
oh yeah, without snow, and if some friends with me to share it, then that's really good.
Oh, that's fantastic. So time to play fun facts. Is there something that you would care to share with us that people may not know or not everyone knows that they wouldn't suspect? The sort of thing that might lead to a certain amount of harassment or teasing at a PBSA conference?
Well, I mentioned South Africa. So I was married at one time for about 6 years. And for 3 of those 6 years, we lived in Johannesburg,
Oh,
South Africa. You'll be glad to know I did not get arrested by the police for something called illegal channeling. Apparently, it has to do with lane changes. But, I managed to get out of that one with a warning. But after 3 years, oh, I know I should. Okay, one other little tidbit from South Africa. Shortly after I arrived, I was invited to this ladies' luncheon. And the lady hosting this luncheon had just been voted the best dressed woman in South Africa.
oh my God.
You think I wasn't excited about going to this luncheon? Anyway, everybody but me was wearing chiffon at this luncheon. So I thought, oh boy, this is going to be a long 3 years. But anyway, after 3 years, I returned to the United States, and I returned to the United States by myself. So marriage didn't work, but we tried. So
I
anyway,
mean, Johannesburg is kind of cool because the Kruger National Park isn't that far away, and the Victoria Falls, and I mean, it's a hop to Cape Town. I mean, so and the wine area. I mean, it's a great place.
it has some lovely, lovely areas. The problem wasn't so much the location.
Okay,
Yeah, there were other problems in addition to that.
but still, what an adventure. I mean, but whatever else happened, what an
Yeah,
adventure.
yeah, it,
I
it
mean,
was absolutely an adventure. But I also have a short story to tell,
please,
if I may. And
absolutely.
I don't think many people know this story, but it is what I call, and what my family called, the Christmas story. So, with that as a backdrop. All right, I was born in October, and when I was born, I couldn't eat. Food would not actually get into my stomach. It would just all, back up, and I was I was eating very, very little, just like little bits. After 2.5 months, when I had continued to like lose weight and so on, my parents were sure I was pretty close to dying. And so one evening in December, they took me to the hospital. And when I got there, the surgeons there was a membrane that was blocking off most of my stomach. And so the food would go down the esophagus or whatever that is, but then it would come back. Just a little bit would actually get into my stomach. And so the surgeons did that surgery. I was able to eat, and I've been eating ever since. Now, the reason it is called the Christmas story is because this day in December, actually evening in December, happened to be December 24th, Christmas Eve. We were at a Catholic hospital. There was another infant having the same surgery at the same time I was, and his name was Joseph. So you have Catholic hospital, Christmas Eve, Mary and Joseph. That's why it's called the Christmas story.
That's a great story. I was thinking you saying that you couldn't eat. I was born where I couldn't stop eating, and that's been my lifelong issue. Wow. We could go on and on, Mary. This has been so much fun. But we're heading down towards the final stretch here. Let me just ask you a couple questions more. With everything that you have experienced and your successes and everything you've seen, what would your advice be? And we always conclude with this before the last word to the newcomers in the industry. And I define newcomers broadly as being maybe someone who's just got hired as a verification specialist. They're brand new in the industry for a week, or maybe someone starting a firm, or anywhere in between. With your perspective and your experiences that you've described, what would be your advice to somebody in terms of succeeding or getting ahead in the screening industry?
First of all, decide if you want to get ahead in the screening industry. If you have taken a job simply to collect a little bit of money for a while and you don't care long term, well then don't bother. But if you are hoping to stay in that industry and succeed in the industry, the first thing that I would do is to get involved in PBSA. That is an amazing resource. And find out if your company is a PBSA member. And hopefully they will be. But as an employee of a member company, you have access to this body of information that is just massive. And it's not just domestic anymore, it's global. And so wherever your interest lies, you can probably find resources to address that interest. Also, look at people within your own organization. Observe them for a while, watch what they do, and decide, perhaps this person can help me take the next step. So find someone that you believe will be a good mentor or influencer. Learn as much as you can. Volunteer to do things both in your own company and with PBSA. And that's how you do it. That's how you start working on your career, and that's what you continue to do for as long as you are in that career. There's always a lot to learn.
So that's the golden ticket right there.
Yes, it is.
Absolutely. Well, Mary, this has been fantastic, and let me end by asking you sort of a two-part question. Number one, is there anything I didn't ask you that you would like to mention? And number two, is there any last things that you want to say? The floor is yours.
Well, I think your listeners are probably delighted that I'm just about to the last word. I've been talking a lot, despite my first lesson being listen, listen, listen. But, that's what I will repeat. The last word, I think those 3 lessons are so important for success. They are such foundational pieces. Listen, listen, listen. Be prepared. Only promise what you can deliver. And if you can do that, if you do that, I have no doubt you will find success in whatever you decide to do. And to all of the people, PBSA and so on, that helped me so very much in my career, again, I say thank you. And lest you were one of those people. So thank you very much. And it's been a pleasure to be on your podcast.
Oh, it's been a pleasure to have you, and it's so exciting to have a chance to talk to you. And as long as we've known each other, it's been more than a minute. I continue to be amazed. You continue to amaze me. So it's such a pleasure to talk to you and hear your insights and hear more about some of the things that you did. It's just an amazing story, and it's a story that's not over. You still have lots of things to do. That's
do.
fantastic.
I do. Yeah. And it's fun. It's fun having the luxury to pick and choose when there have been times in my life where I have to have a job because I have to pay my bills. And to have the luxury of deciding what I'm going to do is wonderful.
That's fantastic. Well, Mary, we're going to conclude now. Stay on. Don't go anywhere quite yet. Let me just thank Mary Poquette. As I said at the top of the program, a member of the first board of any PBSA, a recipient of the Mike Sankey Lifetime Achievement Award, so well deserved, a member of a firm that took off like a rocket, and of which she was a key part, and then just so many other great things we talked about. Mary, thank you for being on the show. Ladies and gentlemen, this was another great edition of the podcast series Behind the Screens, again brought to us with our primary sponsor being Barry Nixon's Pre-Employment Directory and the Background Buzz, which I think I read every time at the minute it comes out. And stay tuned. And be sure, if you like this program or other programs, be sure to subscribe on YouTube because that helps spread the word. And on LinkedIn, if you'd be so kind, if you're inclined to hit like or repost, that augments the number of people who see these programs. And hopefully we can all learn things. And at that point, let me thank Mary Poquette one more time. And we'll see you next time on Behind the Screens. Thanks. All right, that was yet another wonderful conversation with a background screening pro. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to hit subscribe so you never miss an update. And hey, if you got a moment, we'd love for you to leave us a review. It really helps get the word out. For more info or to catch up on past episodes, or to make suggestions or to suggest possible future guests, head over to our website. Once again, this is your host, Les Rosen, and it's been a pleasure to bring you another episode. See you on the next episode. Thanks.